All right, we left off at the end of our time together in school on chapter 20. And so I'm going to pick up with chapter 21 today. But for those of you who can't remember where we left off, or if you want to show this video to your parents too, I'll summarize just a little bit about what happened so far. And if I forget anything that you think is important to share with your family if they're watching, pause it before I start reading, fill them in on Serafina and the Twisted Staff, fill them in on Serafina and the Black Cloak, because we are in book 3, Serafina and the Splintered Heart of the Serafina series. So where we left off, Serafina woke up from a grave. We don't know if she's dead or alive right now, but we know that no person has been able to interact with Serafina like normal. So up to this point, she's tried to stir the steam on a cup of tea. She turned into water and floated down a river and turned back into whatever she is, a ghost, a spirit. And at the end of chapter 20, she has found Lady Rowena in the woods. Remember, we thought Lady Rowena was dead from the end of the second book. But it turns out she's alive, and Serafina whispers to her from the forest. Rowena can hear her. Rowena doesn't know where Serafina is, but Serafina says, "I haven't been bothering you," she whispered. "I just got here." Rowena immediately froze, obviously surprised by the sound of her voice. For several seconds, Rowena did not move or say a word. Her dark red eyebrows furrowed. "Who are you?" she asked. And that's the end of chapter 20. Another amazing cliffhanger from the author Robert Beatty. So we've talked in class about how he is just so good. One of you made the observation that he is so good at just leaving us wanting more. So we're going to start with chapter 21, and I'm going to ask you one question at the very end. If you want me to know your answer, you want me to know your thoughts on the chapter, respond in the comments and I'll read it. But if you want to just talk about it with your family or just think about it, that's okay too. Serafina couldn't believe it. Rowena had heard her. She was actually talking to her. "I'm warning you," Rowena said sternly, looking up into the air. "I'll summon you out by force if I have to." As Rowena lifted her open hand, the trees above Serafina began to shake and rattle with a threatening violence. Serafina could feel the air around her pulsating. This means that somehow Rowena has control over the forest, over the air around it. "I know you're there," Rowena said, "so don't just lurk out there. Tell me who you are." Serafina was too frightened to answer, fearing that Rowena would destroy her the moment she said her name. Remember, because of the battle they had at the end of book 2. She wanted to run while she still had the chance, but Rowena was the only person she'd encountered since she crawled from the grave who could hear her. "Are you living or are you dead?" Rowena demanded. "We don't even know." Serafina froze. She didn't know what to do. "I asked you a question," Rowena said. "Are you living or are you dead?" Finally, feeling like she had no other choice, Serafina decided to speak again. I don't rightly know," she admitted. Rowena seemed to understand that answer in ways Serafina did not. "But who are you?" Rowena asked again. "Where do you come from?" Her voice was gentler now, almost kind, as if she'd enticed, convinced, reluctant spirits to come from the shadows before. Serafina began, but then stopped, too uncertain to continue. "Don't be frightened," Rowena said, her voice filled with a compassion that Serafina had never heard from her before. "Just tell me your name. No harm can come from that." Serafina stopped again. "Yes?" Serafina ducked down behind a tree. "I'm Serafina," she said finally. "The cat?" Rowena hissed. She spun around and peered out into the forest. Rowena crouched down and looked all around her like she thought the catamount was going to pounce on her at any moment. And Serafina knew that she probably would have attacked the sorceress if everything had been the way it was before, but in her current form, how could she fight Rowena? How could she do anything? "Something's happened to me," Serafina told her. "But you're still here in this world?" Rowena said. her voice filled with an uneasiness as she looked around her for signs of attack. "Part of me, at least," Serafina said. Rowena paused, taking in these words. "But why have you come here?" she asked suspiciously. "You're the only person I've found who can hear me," Serafina said. Rowena pressed her lips together and nodded. "I can speak to both sides now." "You mean the living and the dead? Were you the one who woke me from the grave? Were you talking to me?" Serafina asked. Rowena ignored her question. "Was it you?" Serafina pressed her. "What did you say to me?" Rowena shook her head. "It doesn't matter now. Just the ramblings of a troubled soul, nothing of consequence. I have to be careful when I go to a cemetery, but especially that one." Then Rowena's tone took on a harder edge, like she wanted to change the subject. "Did you come here, to my home, to kill me? Is that it? To seek your revenge?" Serafina knew it was a fair question, but as she had been talking to Rowena, she felt more and more relieved that she was finally able to interact with someone. Whether she wanted it to or not, her hatred for Rowena was slowly fading behind her into a past that seemed so long ago. "No," she said to Rowena, "I didn't follow you here to kill you. To be honest, after the battle for the Twisted Staff, I thought you and your father were already dead." "We're not easy to kill," Rowena said. "But I don't understand what's happening," Serafina responded. "Is Brayden on your side now?" "No," Rowena said. "But I saw him with the black cloak." "Where did you see him?" Rowena asked quickly, her voice filled with so much interest that it made Serafina reluctant to answer. Serafina didn't want to answer. And I'm wondering if the reason Rowena responded so quickly to that question about Brayden turning bad and where he was, I wonder if Rowena has been looking for him. "I don't understand," Serafina said. "Where did the black cloak come from? I destroyed it on the angel's sword the last night we defeated Mr. Thorn." "We remade it," Rowena said. "The silver clasp is the core of its power, not the fabric." Serafina frowned in frustration, regretting she hadn't found the clasp and melted it down when she had the chance. Rowena seemed to have so much more knowledge than she did, so much more capability, and yet there was something about her, a hopelessness in her, a feeling of sadness, of giving up, and there had been fear in there too. She'd been frightened of something, telling it to go away. Who or what was she hiding from deep in this forest? "The truth is," Serafina said finally, "I have no wish to harm you, Rowena. With the way I am now, I'm just right glad to know I'm not just a gust of wind." "A lot has happened since I fought you, Serafina," Rowena said. Her voice was somber and weary, so kind of calm and sad. It was clear to Serafina that Rowena too had suffered. "What do you mean?" Serafina asked, moving toward her. "You've corrupted Brayden, haven't you? You've pulled him to your side." "No," Rowena said again, her voice edged with fierceness. "I haven't." "But he's not who he was before," Serafina said. "None of us are," Rowena responded. "He no longer cares about his animals. He's lying to his aunt and uncle, and I told you I saw him wearing the black cloak. You've taken him." Suddenly, Rowena turned, looking around her toward an accuser she couldn't see. "You think you know him?" she snarled. "You think you can see what's inside his heart, whether he's good or bad, strong or weak? You don't know anything about any of us, Cat. You're such a little fool." "But I don't understand," Serafina screamed at her in reply. "You think you've lost your friend? Is that it?" Rowena scoffed. "You don't even know what friendship is." "And you do?" Serafina snarled. "I've seen it," Rowena hissed. "What are you talking about?" Serafina cried in confusion. "Sometimes you're blind, Cat, with more teeth and claws than sense," Rowena shouted as she grabbed a flask from a nearby trunk. "I'll show you what I've seen." Rowena hurled the glass flask toward the sound of Serafina's voice. It crashed against the trunk of a tree and exploded with a great blast of whirling smoke and a bright, blinding haze. Then Rowena threw another glass and it shattered against the ground, its darkened blue contents, the stuff inside, rising up in a great swirl. Then she threw another, and the whole world felt as if it were shifting beneath Serafina's feet. Serafina felt cold air all around her, and then the world disappeared. I'll pick up in chapter 22 in the next video, but I promised I would ask you one question. You can respond to it in the comments or just think about it. If you watched this video with someone, you could talk about it with them. But I'm curious to know everything we know about Serafina, about Rowena, about their history. Does this interaction in the forest surprise you? Does it confuse you? I want to know how you're feeling about it. Them shifting from being harsh with one another in the forest to some softness, some kindness. It seems like Rowena is going to share something with Serafina. Give me one word to describe how you're feeling about this interaction. Some examples are surprised, confused. I guess you could be not surprised. Respond, tell me how you feel, and click on the next video for chapter 22.